Have you ever wondered why some women give until they have nothing left? Why they love broken men, heal others' wounds, and call it compassion, even when it slowly drains the life from their own? It is not mere kindness. It is a contract written deep in the unconscious, a vow to save the world as a way to avoid saving the self. Jung called it the wound of the Redeemer, the shadow side of the archetype of the healer. Beneath its light lies exhaustion, silent rage, and the quiet terror of never being enough. The savior complex begins as innocence. A girl learns early that her value is measured in how much pain she can soothe, how much chaos she can absorb without breaking. She becomes the balm for everyone else's wounds, the friend who listens, the partner who forgives, the daughter who carries what her mother could not bear. Her empathy becomes a shield, but also a prison, because beneath her radiant compassion lives an unconscious belief: if I can fix them, I will finally be safe. If I can heal their brokenness, mine will disappear. This is how the archetype of the savior seduces her, offering purpose in exchange for her peace. Every wounded man becomes a mission, every emotional storm a chance for redemption. And yet, each time she rescues another, her own life slips further from her grasp. She calls it love, but it is a form of control, an attempt to master chaos by becoming indispensable to it. In Jungian terms, the savior complex is a projection of the inner healer who has not yet integrated her own shadow. Her compassion is a mirror of her unhealed pain. She sees the suffering in others because it resonates with something ancient within her, a wound inherited from generations of women who were told that their worth lies in sacrifice. So she carries the archetype of the martyr cloaked in modern empathy, mistaking self-erasure for virtue. You might recognize her in yourself. You might be the woman who feels a man's sadness before he speaks, who senses his buried trauma and calls it potential. You may tell yourself you're helping him evolve, that your patience is divine. But look closely. Does your love heal him, or does it merely keep him dependent? Do you give from abundance, or because emptiness terrifies you? Compassion, when bound to fear, becomes codependence dressed as grace. The Stoics understood this trap in another way. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Yet the woman with the savior complex seeks power over the minds of others, not from malice, but from desperation. If she can soothe every pain around her, she believes the world will stop hurting her in return. But the more she reaches outward, the more fractured she becomes within. There is a strange comfort in rescuing others. It gives meaning to suffering. Jung said that neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. When she saves others, she avoids her own despair. She transfers her chaos into caretaking, turning healing into a distraction. She becomes addicted to being needed, terrified of being seen. Because being seen would mean confronting the part of her that is not holy but hungry, the shadow that whispers, "If you stop saving them, who will you be?" And this is the paradox. Her empathy is real, her heart immense, yet her giving is not always pure. It carries the scent of longing, for control, for validation, for absolution. She wants to heal others because she cannot bear to face her own helplessness. But healing cannot come from denial. The savior must descend into her own underworld, the very place she has avoided by tending everyone else's wounds. Only there can compassion be reborn, not as sacrifice, but as wisdom. To love without saving requires an evolution of consciousness. It means standing before another's pain and resisting the urge to fix it. It means trusting that others have their own destinies, their own teachers, their own suffering to shape them. Real compassion is not rescue. It is presence. It is the courage to let someone fall, not from cruelty but from faith that they will rise. Yet this lesson is the hardest for the savior to learn. She equates letting go with betrayal. detachment with indifference. She fears that without her, the ones she loves will collapse. But this fear is an illusion born of childhood, the belief that love equals responsibility for another's emotions. The truth is quieter and far more powerful. Love is not control, it is freedom. As she begins to awaken, she sees the pattern replaying in every relationship, every friendship, every workplace, places where she became the emotional anchor, the secret healer, the quiet therapist. She realizes it was never just about others. It was about her need to be chosen for her usefulness rather than her being. This revelation breaks something open inside her, something both painful and liberating. Because the moment she stops trying to save everyone, she must face the silence of her own unmet needs. She must ask, who heals the healer? Who carries the woman who carried the world? There comes a moment when the woman who saves must confront the truth that compassion without boundaries becomes self-abandonment. It is the moment she looks at her reflection, not the one she shows to others, soft and radiant, but the one behind her eyes, weary and unseen. For the first time, she notices the quiet fatigue beneath her smile, the tremor of resentment beneath her kindness. She realizes that her love has not always been free. It has often been a transaction disguised as virtue. Every act of rescue had an unspoken plea, please don't leave me. Please see that I am good. That hidden bargain is the core of the savior complex, the hope that salvation earned through others' healing will finally justify her existence. But such justification never arrives, because healing another is not the same as becoming whole. And the more she tries to earn her worth through compassion, the more she confirms the unconscious belief that she had none to begin with. Jung would say she has been living in the inflation of the archetype, the healer possessed by her own medicine. When one identifies completely with an archetype, they cease to be human. They become its servant. The woman becomes mercy itself, carrying the suffering of others as if she were divine, while her own soul starves in the background. Her compassion turns tyrannical. She cannot stop helping, cannot stop giving, even when it destroys her. Because without saving, she doesn't know how to exist. You might know this feeling, the emptiness that appears when you are no one's savior, when the chaos settles and no one needs you. It is not peace that you feel then, but panic. Because peace feels like irrelevance to someone who has tied their worth to usefulness. That is the hidden wound behind compassion, the fear of being ordinary, of being unneeded, of being unloved unless indispensable. But slowly, awareness begins to shift. She begins to see that not all compassion is love. Some compassion is control, veiled in sweetness. Some empathy is avoidance, painted as selflessness. She starts to notice how she seeks out broken people not because she is called to heal them, but because they reflect her own fracture. Their pain feels familiar, almost sacred. It makes her feel at home in dysfunction, because healing them feels like rewriting her own past. The Stoics would call this a misunderstanding of nature. Seneca warned that to help others rightly, one must first stand firm in one's own virtue. You cannot pour wisdom from a trembling hand. Yet the Savior resists this truth. Her identity is entwined with sacrifice. To stop saving feels like betrayal, not only of others but of the self she has built. And yet, beneath her exhaustion, a quiet rebellion stirs. A voice whispers, "You were never meant to be everyone's cure." At first, she rejects it. Who would she be if not the healer, the empath, the understanding one? But the whisper persists. You were meant to be whole, not holy. So she begins to turn inward, trembling. She sits with her own wounds, the loneliness she covered with caretaking, the guilt she mistook for empathy, the fear she named compassion. She realizes she has spent years healing others to avoid her own transformation, because real healing would require her to stop performing goodness and start embodying truth. The descent is brutal. She must face the shadow of her own savior, the part that needed to be needed, the manipulator hiding behind kindness, the anger she buried beneath forgiveness. These are not pretty revelations, but they are sacred. Jung taught that the shadow, when integrated, becomes a source of immense strength. The woman who faces her darkness becomes luminous not because she denies it, but because she owns it. When she begins to integrate, her compassion changes shape. It becomes quieter, steadier, less desperate. She no longer rushes to fix, she listens. She no longer bleeds for others. She witnesses. She understands now that suffering has its own intelligence, that sometimes pain must be honored, not erased. She begins to trust that others have their own inner healer, just as she does. And as she steps back, something miraculous happens. The people she once saved begin to stand. They find their own strength, their own resilience. She sees that her constant rescuing was, in some way, a kind of theft. She had robbed others of their chance to grow. By always carrying them, she denied them the sacred friction of falling and rising. Now, she walks differently. Her presence still comforts, but it does not consume. Her empathy no longer demands recognition. She begins to understand the difference between compassion and compulsion. Compassion gives without losing itself. Compulsion gives to prove it exists. The more she learns this, the freer she becomes. But freedom carries grief. She must mourn the woman who believed love required suffering, who thought salvation meant control. She must bury the Savior so that the healer can be reborn. In this mourning, she discovers the raw truth of her own humanity. For so long, she had lived as an archetype, the benevolent one, the selfless one, the eternal giver. But archetypes are masks the psyche wears to survive. They are powerful, yes, but also limiting. And the moment she removes the mask, the air burns. Because beneath all her kindness, there was always anger. Anger at being unseen, at being taken, at being called strong when what she needed was rest. That anger is sacred. It is the buried voice of her soul reclaiming its place in the world. Jung wrote that the shadow is not merely the dark, it is the gold we refuse to own. The woman who carries the savior complex has disowned her power under the disguise of love. She has given it away in every apology, every "I understand," every time she carried a man's pain while silencing her own. But now, that suppressed power rises like a tide. And for the first time, she allows herself to feel it, not as rage toward others but as reclamation of self. You can sense it too, can't you? That subtle trembling inside when you realize your kindness was a survival strategy, that your compassion was not born purely from light, but from fear. Fear of being unloved if you ever said no. Yet this awareness is not punishment. It is awakening. The woman who sees this truth begins to move differently through the world. She speaks less, but her words carry weight. She gives less, but what she gives heals deeper. She no longer chases the role of savior. She embodies sovereignty. Still, the ego resists this evolution. It whispers, "Who are you if you're not needed?" Because ego feeds on identity, and identity feeds on repetition. The savior must die again and again in the small moments. The unanswered message, the silence after setting a boundary, the discomfort of watching others struggle without rushing in. Each of these moments feels like loss, but in truth, each one is liberation. The Stoics called this discipline of letting go apatheia, not indifference, but mastery of attachment, to love without possession, to help without enslavement. Seneca taught that the wise person gives from principle, not from impulse. And in this way, the awakened woman becomes something rarer. Not a rescuer, but a mirror. Her very presence reminds others of their strength, not their weakness. She begins to see relationships in a new light. The man she once would have saved now stands before her as a test, a reflection of her old self. His chaos no longer feels like destiny. It feels like déjà vu. She recognizes the wounded boy behind his charm, the dependence hidden beneath his need. But instead of stepping into his pain, she holds her ground. She offers empathy, not surrender. And as she does, she feels something shift inside, a quiet triumph that comes not from control, but from clarity. This clarity changes everything. The woman who once needed to be chosen now chooses. The woman who once begged to be understood now understands herself. The world still calls her compassionate, but they do not see that her compassion now burns differently, like a steady flame instead of a wildfire. She no longer seeks to heal others to avoid her own emptiness. She has learned to sit in that emptiness until it becomes fertile ground. And from that ground, new desires grow. She no longer wants to save. She wants to create. She no longer wants to be the reason someone survives. She wants to be the reason someone awakens. Her love matures from motherly caretaking into sacred partnership. She stops confusing pity with intimacy, rescue with devotion. Her relationships now mirror her own integration, equal, grounded, soulful. But this evolution demands solitude. The woman must pass through a period of sacred withdrawal, the desert between her old identity and her true essence. It is a lonely terrain. There are no hands to hold, no roles to hide. Behind, only silence and the sound of her own breath as she rebuilds from within. Yet it is in this aloneness that she meets the self, not the persona, not the savior, but the eternal center Jung spoke of, the divine axis of the psyche, where wholeness resides. This meeting transforms her. She begins to see compassion not as sacrifice, but as presence. Love not as rescue, but as resonance. She learns that real healing happens not when she absorbs another's pain, but when she holds space for it, without losing her own light. This is the mature feminine, the one who can nurture without negating herself, guide without controlling, love without dissolving. And though the world still calls to her, its cries of pain, its endless demands, she listens differently now. She knows that not every call is hers to answer. She understands that refusing to save is sometimes the greatest act of love. Because love that imprisons is not love. It is fear in disguise. When she finally emerges from that sacred solitude, she is no longer the woman who sought to heal through control. Something within her has shifted, subtly, irrevocably. Her compassion no longer burns her alive, it warms her from within. She no longer approaches others with outstretched hands but with open eyes, seeing them as they are, not as projects to be completed. Her love breathes, detached yet deeply alive. The savior complex dissolves not through rejection of empathy, but through the alchemy of awareness. It is transmuted into discernment, the wisdom to know when her energy belongs to the world and when it belongs to herself. She learns that to say no is not cruelty but clarity. To step back is not abandonment but respect for another's path. Every refusal becomes an affirmation of self-sovereignty. In Jungian language, she has integrated the polarity between the anima's compassion and the shadow's rage. What once tore her apart now completes her. She carries both the healer and the destroyer within, the nurturing goddess and the fierce guardian of boundaries. Her empathy no longer spills into martyrdom. It flows through the channel of consciousness. Compassion becomes precision. And something curious happens when a woman reaches this level of inner integrity. The world begins to treat her differently. The same men who once unconsciously sought to be saved now feel exposed before her. Her energy no longer offers a mother's lap to rest upon, but a mirror that reflects their unhealed wounds. Some retreat, others awaken, because her presence now demands accountability. She doesn't rescue, she reveals. You can sense the difference. There is a quiet power in a woman who no longer needs to be needed. She carries herself with the calm of someone who has faced her own chaos and lived. She no longer begs to be understood. Her silence speaks for her. People feel her depth but cannot manipulate it, because she no longer operates from hunger. Her giving is deliberate, not compulsive. Her love is chosen, not owed. In this state, she understands the paradox that true compassion requires detachment. Attachment breeds control. Detachment births love. To the unawakened, detachment looks cold, but it is the highest expression of warmth because it honors free will. It says, "I see you, I feel your pain, but I trust your path enough not to walk it for you." This is divine empathy, empathy rooted in respect, not pity. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Love only that which happens to you, and is spun with the thread of your destiny." The Savior, reborn, understands this now. She no longer fights the suffering of others as an enemy. She sees it as a teacher. Every person must meet their own shadow in their own time. And so, instead of intervening, she holds space for herself, for others, for the mysterious intelligence of life itself. From this stillness, her relationships evolve into sacred mirrors rather than emotional battlegrounds. She no longer seeks brokenness to mend, but wholeness to reflect. The dynamic shifts from dependency to resonance. She attracts those who meet her not through need, but through depth. Her love ceases to be an escape and becomes a conscious union. And yet, she never forgets what it cost to reach this peace. The nights spent questioning her worth, the tears shed for those who did not want to be saved, the loneliness that carved her into wisdom. All of it remains within her, not as pain, but as sacred memory. She carries it the way a mountain carries its scars, evidence of storms survived, of gravity endured. The transformation of the Savior into the Sovereign is not a single awakening. It is a lifelong discipline. Each day she must choose awareness over impulse, presence over control. But now she knows the secret. To love deeply, one must release completely. And in releasing, she finally meets herself, the woman beneath all the roles, the soul behind all the saving. She realizes that she was never meant to carry the world, only to illuminate it. Her empathy, once a wound, has become her crown. Her heart, once heavy with others' burdens, now beats in rhythm with her own truth. She understands now what Jung meant when he said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And in that becoming, she no longer needs to save, because she has been saved by her own awareness. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.